You're listening to the Sisters in Loss podcast, a faith-based grief and loss podcast for Black women, where you will hear stories of miscarriage, infant loss, stillbirth, and infertility to learn there is a testimony in tragedy. You will learn how to heal, gain clarity, find hope and peace, and turn your pain into your purpose after loss. I'm your host, Erica M. McAfee. Well, thank you so much, Shakeena, for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Okay, so a little bit about me. I am a licensed therapist by trade, and I'll kind of tie into how I brought the fertility journey into something with mental health as well. So I do counseling now for couples that are in all stages, but also couples that are going through fertility, whether it be male factor or female factor, and how that actually plays a toll on the relationship, because that was something that my husband and I actually went through. I think in the second year in our marriage, we started to try and conceive and then had some issues. And at that time, there wasn't a lot of couples. There wasn't any couples actually that were going through what we were going through. So we were really alone in that walk. And that kind of led to, okay, I don't want another couple to kind of go through what we did, and how it took a toll on me, which in turn, took a toll on us. And, he did the best that he could as supporting me going through this, and us, and trying to be that encourager and that motivator. But, when you're going through this, it really isn't anything anybody can say to kind of take you out of it. That hasn't been in that place where you are. It's hard to describe that place even to someone else, especially someone of, the other sex or the other gender. So it's kind of hard to explain it to them. So me being in the shoes and providing the experience, the empathy, along with the clinical part of it, and how it can actually really take a toll on our mental health as far as depression and even trauma, just the fact of all of those things and how it can play on our own psyche. I kind of created Saving Sarah to combine both of those. So it gives the clinical, it gives the experience. And then I'm also a minister, so I kind of incorporate the spiritual part as well, because it does affect mind, body, and soul. So my kind of practice incorporates all three of those to kind of help with the fertility walk or the journey that we kind of go through. So that's a little bit about it.
Yes, and I love that. I get the threefold approach too, because that's the name of your counseling, which is neat. I like that. So take us back on that journey to motherhood and just share with us your fertility journey so far.
So when I first started my cycle, even as a teenager, I started my cycle kind of late compared to like the rest of my peers. Some girls were getting their cycles early as 9, 11, 14. I didn't actually start my cycle until I was 16 years old. And then it started for maybe about 3 or 4 months, and it was normal. And then it just disappeared. Never came back since the age of 16 years old until adulthood. And that was by medication. So at 16 years old, I knew something was wrong, because that's not a normal thing. And at 16, I also didn't really care, because, you're having fun. If anything, your cycle would kind of put a damper on the things that you want to do. Being active and having a cycle wasn't really important. So I didn't feel like, okay, I was missing out on too much. But my mother also knew, okay, that isn't a normal thing, but let's go see what it is. So we did go to the doctor, and they diagnosed me with amenorrhea, which is just the absence of a cycle. That was as far as it went. But I knew, okay, this is something that's just not a normal thing for a female. But again, I didn't pay it any attention. And it wasn't until I got married that, okay, and we started trying, that I said, I already knew it wasn't going to be easy, because I did not have a cycle. So instead of waiting that 2 years that, most fertility specialists tell you to wait 2 years, continue to try and come back to us. I just said, I'm not going to wait 2 years, because 1, I know my body better than what you can tell me anything of. I'm not going to wait 2 years. There's no reason for me to prolong us expanding a family for 2 years when I'm telling you that this isn't right. And most doctors, of course, they felt like they knew best. So most of them wanted me to wait. But my mom was actually working for OBGYN. So I went to see him, and he was like, okay, well, let's just get started. So We went through some labs. They did an ultrasound. And then that's when they found out that I had PCOS, which is Poly Cystic Ovarian Syndrome, where I had cysts on my ovaries. So it would make it really, really difficult for us to conceive. I also had high levels of testosterone, which again would also increase our chances to have children. So he then referred me to a fertility specialist at that point, because once they found it, it wasn't much that a OBGYN can do. So he then referred me to a fertility specialist to kind of do some more invasive testing and confirm that, yes, I did have PCOS, and then kind of find out what the best treatment course would be for us. Because of my age, I was about, I would say maybe 24 at the time. I was fairly young. My health overall was good. He said, okay, well, let's try Clomid first and see how that goes. Clomid, was something that was supposed to induce my cycle. So I was actually really relieved, because finally I knew something was wrong, and it just confirmed, okay, yes, Shakeena, you do have something. This is what it is. Cool. I was, most people are not excited about receiving a diagnosis, where I was actually thrilled, because I'm like, yes, I know there's a problem. We have identified what the problem is. So therefore you should have some kind of plan. Always about plans. Okay, yes, I have PCOS. Now what's the plan? So that just confirmed I wasn't crazy. I wasn't a hypochondriac. I wasn't imagining it. Like, something really is wrong with my reproductive system. So I was relieved when he told me, okay, this is what it is. And I was kind of gung-ho. They tell you all of these good things. The likelihood is great if we try this, and this is going to kickstart your cycle. And I said, okay, we took the pills. These were like magic pills for me. I said, okay, this would do the one thing my body couldn't do. And once I do this, then this should happen. We started on our cycle. We started tracking the cycle, started Clomid. It did do exactly what it was supposed to do, and it did jumpstart my cycle. So we practiced and tried the traditional way and didn't yield any results. And actually my cycles tapered off, so it stopped even with the Clomid. So that was kind of discouraging, because I put so much hope into these pills, and I thought this would be like the magic thing that would get it going. So I was a little taken back by the failed attempts. So we went back to the drawing board, and the doctor was like, okay, well, we tried the less invasive things. Let's try something a little more invasive. And that's when he suggested us to do IUI, which is, intrauterine insemination. So again, I said, okay, good. They started telling about the likelihood of us being young, and my husband didn't have any male factor issues. So that was great. The likelihood that percentages increase versus Clomid, and everything looks better. So I'm gung-ho again. I'm like, okay, well, cool. We'll do the IUI. The likelihood is better. The chances are better compared to, just taking the Clomid on its own. So they sent prescriptions. A box of injectables and hormones and all of these things came to my home. And I think at that point, when I saw all of the syringes and all the vials and suppositories, at that point, I was like, okay, like this really is intense. Like, this isn't something I'm just going to take a pill and do. And at that point, when I saw all the things I had to go to, I'm like, this is much more than what I thought would be. Like, this is going to really take some time, and it's not going to be as easy as I thought. So, we watched YouTube videos of how to take the medication. My husband started to inject me. We had a routine, and this really takes so much intimacy out of, being intimate with your husband. Like, you're timing things, you're calculating it. So it's hard to have that normal flow of things when you're trying to calculate time. So when you're making things more scientific, it's hard to be that spontaneous. All that spontaneity for us went out the window. Everything had to be very calculated. So that kind of took a hit to our marriage, where you can't be as spontaneous as we wanted to, because if we did, okay, we had to wait at a specific time, and let's not waste sperm on this, and we had to save it up for that. So, all of those things that people take for granted, you really can't do. Everything becomes so calculated, and it can like dampen moods. hormones exacerbate, all the hormonal things that women already have. So you're crying when you shouldn't be crying. You're irrational, like all of those things. You're yelling when you don't need to. You're taking it out on him. And it was just really, really, really hard. And we tried our best, and, we were praying about it, and a lot of people didn't really understand what we were doing. So we stopped talking to people, because the more you share, it felt like the more people just didn't understand, and the more questions you got. For people that just have children the so-called traditional way, for what we were doing was just like, why? You're young, just give it time. You're young, just pray about it. And all those things that I kind of took as dismissive, because if I'm telling you this is what we're going through and you're just telling me just to wait or pray, it's you're dismissing, you're not validating what I'm saying. Like, you're not hearing my heart. You're just telling me to wait. And if I had any other issue or any other diagnosis, no one would tell me to wait. If I, had cancer, and I always tell people, if I had cancer, no one would tell you to wait on chemo. The first thing they'll say was, you need to go to a doctor and get that taken care of. But for us and infertility, it's not that way. They want you to wait and see what happens, and all the other things where medicine would be the last resort. So anyway, we started to do the trials, and we did the IUI, and my husband did his part. We went in, everything was inseminated. We'd had that lovely 2-week waiting period, which is horrible. All of your hopes are in the 14 days of your life. So we waited the 14 days. We found out the IUI was not successful. So I kind of took a step back, because that was a big blow financially as well, because Florida does not cover a lot of the things that we needed. With my PCOS diagnosis, certain medication was covered, but majority was not. Like egg stimulation isn't covered. All of those, semen analysis, all of those weren't covered. So a lot of this was a financial blow that now we have to kind of reevaluate where our finances are. I have to give my body a rest from all of the hormones and figure out what I want to do, and kind of regroup and give myself time to go back and do it again. And that was just a real blow. After the first attempt, and that didn't work, that kind of spiraled and went, and that's when the depression started. And then it just made me feel like I'm holding my husband back. I'm preventing him from having a family. I felt like I was just holding him back from a lot of things. So I'm impeding my future, but I'm also impeding his. And it's not his fault. It's not mine either, but I felt like it wasn't fair to him, and I could be hindering him having life beyond his own. So I was carrying a burden for me, a burden for him as well. And a lot of things I really didn't share with him, because I didn't want him to feel bad. So there's a lot of things that we take on our own, and we keep it in, because one, no one really understands, and you really don't want to make anyone else feel worse, because he didn't have anything. It wasn't anything he could say or do at the time to make me feel any more or give me hope at the time. So after that failed attempt, we took a little break. I took just a little mental break. And my body was really sore from all of the injections. I had little knots in my muscles, and it just really was uncomfortable. So we took a few months off to regroup, spoke with the doctor again, and we decided to do IUI again. So we did it a second time, and, everything, all the medications came back to the house, and that was kind of a trigger again of me having to do this all over again. My mom helped as far as the financing to get the medication again, to pay for the second attempt. My doctor did give a small discount, because, that's like a consolation. If it didn't work the first time, we'll knock off like $100 for the second time. But it wasn't as expensive, but it's still, still a financial blow for us. But we gathered the resources, we gathered the funds, and we did it again. And the second attempt also didn't work. And at that point, I became really resentful, really angry. Things went from more sad to more anger. And I tell a lot of people now when I'm counseling couples that you go through the stages of grief in this. Every month, we can go through the stages of grief, like just as if we lost someone. You can go through that phase of anger and sadness and resentment and then acceptance and all over. And within 30 days, we can experience what people go through in months. So imagine doing this every month, that you see your cycle and you're realizing that you're grieving a loss of something that you've never had or might not have. So after the second attempt, I really went through those stages, and became in a really dark place. I was questioning my existence. I was questioning my life of why to be here. It wasn't suicidal or anything, but you get those things of what would be my purpose? Why am I here if I'm not able to do the main thing that a gift of womanhood is supposed to have? If I couldn't yield that gift, like what am I supposed to do? Why am I here? What am I going to do with myself? Like, this is the one thing that truly makes me a mother. In my head, if I can't accomplish this, then what use am I? So you kind of feel useless. I just got into a place like just felt useless, hopeless, just in a place of isolation. And then I also worked in a place where mothers would come to me and seeking assistance for kids that they couldn't care for, and, you know, seeking financial means because they had pregnancies that they didn't expect, and they, you know, didn't know what to do in adoption. So having all of those things and working with mothers that seemed so easy to conceive or get something that you could not achieve and want to dispose of it was just another blow that you have to see every day, and try to walk them through that and make them feel comfortable in their choices, knowing that inside you are falling apart. So dealing with that in work and this kind of just, it made me spiral into a place that nobody could really pull me out of. So I took a really long break after the second IUI and just kind of gathered myself. And I got really, really deep into my faith. And I think that kind of actually catapulted me into my walk with Christ. And at that time, I got baptized. I rededicated my life to Christ because there was nothing I could do. At this point, there wasn't anything medicine could do. There wasn't anything no one could do. I felt like only he could do this. There's nothing, even with medicine, it still involves so much faith. And that's another thing that, as a believer, you have to kind of deal with the stigma of people feeling like medicine now intervenes with God when it doesn't. It actually still works hand in hand, and people don't understand. Even though we elect, or some people might elect, to take a medical route or try medicine as an intervention, it doesn't negate anything of our belief or faith. And it takes even that much more faith when you are taking medication. It doesn't say that I'm not a believer. It doesn't say, you know, I don't have faith, it's going to happen. Like, it doesn't negate us as believers. And that's something that I still have to kind of talk to the church about and believers about, that it doesn't mean anything. Again, if I were to take chemo, you wouldn't say that I'm now wavering in faith. No, I can do both. You can believe God to say that he's going to heal me through chemo. So I can believe that God is going to give me a child through this intervention. So all of this now propelled out of that years later. But at the time, I'm also having to defend my decisions. So now I have depression because of this. You're isolated, and now you're having to defend why you want to take this specific route over just sitting and waiting. So that was something that I'm also now having to go through when you don't even have the energy to do it. So you stop telling people because you don't want to hear that. And you don't want to defend yourself. It takes so much energy that going through depression, I already don't have, to now defend my decision and why I'm doing it. And then the fail attempts that happen, you have to kind of repeat your story over and over of what happened, why it didn't work. So we just actually stopped telling people when we were doing things just for those reasons. It was just too much to kind of keep defending myself and keep repeating the same story over again, especially when it fails. Nobody wants to keep repeating their failures over and over again. So we just kind of stopped. We really just gave up. I focused on my faith and just kind of put it in his hands. And I said, when I'm ready, I will go back and, try the next step and see what would happen. So we spoke to my doctor once I was ready. And it was maybe a few months, I would say maybe 6 months. And we went back, I felt like, okay, I just needed to take some time. And also I wanted to make sure that the hormones I was taking kind of got out of my system, because when you're depressed and you're taking all of those hormones, it is really not a good cocktail. So I just wanted to make sure the things and decisions I was making were rational decisions. And I kind of went back to my baseline. So we went to my doctor again, and he suggested to now do IVF, in vitro fertilization, which is like 4 times, 5 times, 6 times more expensive than IUI. So once he laid the all the costs down and the procedures. The medication is similar to the IUI medication. So that part was fine. But now because it's more invasive, I have to go under, they have to do egg retrieval, they have to do insemination, they have to put it back. So all of those costs made it much more than we could, do. So they told us those options. We were considering it. They told us about the financing. And I'm like, now we'd have to finance a child. Like who's heard of these things? Why is this happening? So we took a break and we kind of just went over those things and just kind of wanted to pray about that before we went into it. But in that time, God just actually blessed us with our first daughter, Shanice. And I still chalk it up to faith, but I also chalk it up to the medication I was already on. I don't know if the cocktail, but I do know that was definitely a hand of God that did whatever it is that he did. And that is how we got our first daughter. And actually we have 3 total. We have Shanice, who's 9, Gianna, who's 7, and Jarius Jr., who is 5. But after we had Shanice, even after, after we conceived her, we are just in awe of what he has done for us. Like, that was fine. I was perfectly fine with her. I didn't care if I had another kid afterwards. We was perfectly fine with just making this baby our one miracle baby and just loving on her till she exploded. Like, that was it. And when Shanice turned 1, around her 1-year birthday, I conceived my second daughter and my cycle stopped. But another thing about infertility is that just because you have kids, people feel like you don't have any trauma or wounds from going through that journey. So even after I had Shanice, when I conceived my second daughter and my cycle stopped, I never once assumed that I was pregnant. I just assumed that my cyst came back and, my cycle stopped, and I was perfectly okay. That was just fine. It didn't matter. I was okay. I had my miracle child. Like, everything is all right with the world. So my first mind and my first instinct was not like I'm pregnant at all. But I went to a friend's mother, she's like, just go do it. Like, just go take a test and see. And sure enough, I was pregnant again like I was almost 4 months pregnant with her. But because that wasn't something that crossed my mind. The first place my mind goes to isn't pregnancy. Like, that's not a thing that I even think of. Even right now, if someone was to say, my cycle was to stop, that wouldn't be a first thing in my mind. And if people suggest it to me, I easily dismiss that as well, because like, that's not something that comes easily for me. Like, that's not a scare. I've never had a pregnancy scare. Like, those things don't come to my mind because I already know that's not something that's quote unquote easy for me. So even though I have 3 kids, you still have wounds and trauma that your mind doesn't go to those places that a normal person would go. Pregnancy is not something that would be the first thing that pops into my mind. The first thing that pops into in my mind is actually that my body is now reverting to where it was. My body has now grown this cyst on the ovaries again. And those are the first thing that comes to mind. It's always my body has now just reset itself to where it normally was or where it was in the beginning. So now with all of that, Saving Sarah has come about, 3Chord has come about. So now I have 2 separate businesses, but still surrounding infertility at its core. So 3Chord is, yes, it is that business where we counsel the couples, and Saving Sarah is more of just that. It is geared towards the woman that is going through infertility, and you need someone to go with you to your doctor's appointments, because even that can be nerve-wracking if you're waiting on lab tests and your partner might not be there, your partner might be working. Nobody wants to go to receive any news or any tests alone. So we have someone that can go with you when you just want to do support groups with other women that okay, they know the lingo, we know the acronyms, we know what, donor dad, like we know all of the acronyms, like it has its own language that people don't understand unless you've done this walk. So we have support groups where we allow each other the event, we allow support. And when that person has been there, when they tell you something, that they truly understand and they're not just saying it to pacify you. So we We do support groups. We do diet plans and how to work, because, certain things like PCOS, you have to monitor your diet. You have to monitor your sugar. You have to monitor exercise and weight gain. Like, those are things that we have to kind of, especially for this diagnosis, you have to be mindful of. So we do diet plans. We do holistic things and acupuncture and things that they say increases the likelihood of having it. Like, we do all of those things. I'm just geared about because of this journey. And although mine is different than maybe some of the ladies that come across, I still know what the hurt is like when you don't get a positive. I still know what the hurt is like when you get a failed IUI, or you get a bill in the mail for something that didn't result in a baby. You're paying for the attempt and it didn't result in a child. I know what that's like. You're paying for something, yet you didn't receive what you went into the doctor's office for, but yet and still you still have to pay it. We help moms to kind of find out resources and finances and grants to kind of help you to pay for these things. Because, the state that we're in, Florida, our benefits don't cover that. Whereas a sister in New York, her benefits might. So we kind of help them to navigate even the insurances and the bills and the grants and who you can go to an organization. So it's more of just advocating for them, because when you're going through it, the last thing you want to do is look up grants and who can help you. Like, you have enough on your plate that we don't want this to be something else that you now have to worry about. We want you to try and remain calm and peaceful as much as you can to make sure that you are at the best and emotionally, spiritually, and mentally, so that you can make your body the healthiest place to conceive, however that's going to look like for you. Whether you have to have a donor person or a surrogate, wherever that may be, whatever your walk is, all of us are going to have different routes in this. Everybody's journey is going to look different. But one thing we know what that hurt is still we know what that's like. The disappointment, we know what that's like. Negative tests, we know what that's like. So we can kind of just encourage each other along the way. So all of that came from just my journey and the kind of the vision that God gave me and said, okay, it is time for us to kind of combine faith and fertility and make this like, it's enough. So that is kind of where I got today, or where I am today.
Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp.com. That is better, HELP.com. Is there something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your personal goals? BetterHelp will assist your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. You can start communicating in under 24 hours. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It is professional counseling done securely online. There's a broad range of expertise in BetterHelp's counselor network, which may not be locally available in many areas. This service is available for clients worldwide. You can log into your account anytime and send a message directly to your counselor. You'll get timely and thoughtful responses. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions so you won't ever have to sit in an uncomfortable waiting room as with traditional therapy. BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches, so they make it easy and free to change counselors if needed. BetterHelp wants you to start living a happier life today. Visit their website at betterhelp.com/sisters. That's better, HELP, and join the over 500,000 people taking charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional. There's a special offer for our listeners. For Sisters in Loss listeners, get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/sisters. I'm so excited for you all to tune into BetterHelp, as I've been using it for the last 4 weeks, and I absolutely love the counselor that I was matched with. You can also choose a counselor that specifically works with African-American patients or is African-American themselves, especially if you're looking for someone who can relate to your cultural experiences as you're going through grief, loss, and healing. Once again, the website to get 10% off is betterhelp.com/sisters, betterhelp.com/sisters.
Thank you so much for sharing that. 2 follow-up questions. So you were able to conceive naturally through help with medication for all 3 of your pregnancies?
Just the first one. So after Shanice, because once I got her, I stopped all the medications because they also have like different side effects, and I'm scared like later down the line something would happen. So after her, and she was born, I never saw my fertility specialist. I was still seeing my gynecologist, of course, but I didn't take any medication to conceive her. She just came the will of God.
Wow, that is a blessing. Oh my goodness. So your faith walk through your journey with your daughter, because once you conceived her, I know you said that she was your miracle baby, and you all were not thinking that you were going to try again and conceive other children. So just talk about just your faith walk throughout that process, and then really how your relationship was impacted from it as well.
My relationship with Christ or my relationship with my husband?
Both, your relationship with Christ and your husband.
So before we conceived Shanice, it was there was none for a while. And I'm not even going to lie, I was just angry. Like I was angry because I felt like I tried to do the so-called good route. I waited until after I got married. I waited until after I finished school. Like I tried to do those things in the proper order, quote unquote. And I didn't understand, like I did all those things that you would require of us. So why am I here when this person or that person did none of these things and are able to it seemed like just easy to have. So there was some resentment, there was anger, there was frustration. Like there was no relationship on my part. Of course, thank God, God does not think as we do or feel as we do, because I stopped talking to him. I stopped praying about it. I got to a point where there was no need. I felt like I wasn't being heard. And I was there for quite a while. It seemed like quite a while. I can't even tell you how long, but it seemed like I was at that place for quite a while. And the good thing about God is even if we don't talk to him, he can still talk to us. My mother's boyfriend at the time had a pastor that came from Trinidad, and he actually came over and prayed for me. Didn't have to, he just knew my story, and he said, I want to come over and pray. And one of his times when he was visiting from Trinidad and he was visiting in the States, came over and prayed for me. And that kind of just reset my faith. And I was like, I can't stay in this place anymore. And he kind of gave me a prophecy of, me conceiving. And that's another thing. Even when he prophesied, it took several months or up to a year after that before I actually conceived Shanice. So that's another thing. Even when you are walking in this faith and you receive prophecy of someone telling you that this is going to come, you can get to a point where you just want to dismiss our prophecy because you don't see it. And I got to a place where I just stop talking to me. Stop telling me that this is going to happen. Do you not see that it's not happening? So I think God had to just show me. And I think that's why my intervention might have been a little different, or my results might have been a little different, because he didn't want any confusion of me. Okay, yes, like this one baby wasn't a fluke. So let me show you. And he gave me 2 and 3 afterwards. That's just my revelation of how I got it. Like he just wanted to show me, like, listen, if I tell you I'm going to do something, I'm going to do something. So after that part, after he prayed, it kind of got me into a shift where I said, okay, I can't do this without him. And my husband is also, he grew up in church where I didn't. And he would do prayer. Even when people were praying for me, I wasn't praying. Like people were praying for me, I wasn't praying for myself. But to have that support system of people that are still interceding when you are not praying for yourself, and they're still having them pray for you, is something amazing. That I'm so now appreciative of. So my walk wasn't a walk. I was just standing still, and I was standing still out of just being stubborn and rebellious. But then when I had people that God knew to just send my way all the way from Trinidad to come and prophesy for little old me and to pray just for me, then to have my husband cover and intercede just for me when you don't want to do it, did something. I'm like, I couldn't stay at this place. And before I even got back into church, I started to talk to God. And that was my first step of just talking and journaling. And I still journal to this day. So even when I didn't feel like talking, I wrote about it. And I actually used some of those when I talk to other women. So like, I'm not just talking. I need you to see where I was. Like when I tell you I was depressed, come look and see what I was writing about. So those journals came back to just be like full circle for me to see like how really far gone and how deep it was. I was just like angry. Everything was bitter. Everything was just nasty. So I just started journaling, and each journal, each book, you can kind of see the shift that happens. Okay, like it went from just talking, and then some of the journal entries were talking to him. So you see some of my entries saying, today I just felt like, why am I here? Like, this doesn't make any sense. Why don't he just take my complete ovaries? To, dear God, this is what happened today. So you can actually see in the journal, I just went from just talking at him to now going back into having a relationship and addressing him through the journal entries. And I started doing that before I even stepped foot back into church. I had to have that. My relationship was growing before I even got back into anyone's church. And, I was just saying, even if I was angry, I started telling him I was angry. Like, God, I know I'm not supposed to feel this way, but this is what I'm feeling. Like, this is where I am. And I don't understand why. Like, all the questions I had, I wrote out. And I still didn't, I didn't have answers, but I just wrote them out. And that was my therapy. I wrote everything that I was feeling. And when I got it from my head down on paper, it was out of my heart at that time for the moment, even just for the day, it was out of me for that moment in time. And then I slowly got back into reading devotionals. And then the devotionals were encouraging to get back into fellowship, get back in the house of the Lord, being in his presence, and just having other believers stand by your side, even if you don't tell them. And there are a lot of devotionals for fertility as well, which I, found out through that. Like, there are devotionals just for this. So that just proves like faith and fertility go hand in hand. And that kind of shifted my mind. Okay, I need to be around other believers, even if I don't want to disclose exactly what's going on, tell them, hey, I need help and I'm in a dark place, and have them come and cover me and pray for me. And then my husband and I started going into finding a home church and just listening and being in the presence, and, not actively in ministry, but just even in the sanctuary and just taking the word and kind of filling myself back up, because I was really empty. So I just sat in church, did not participate in anything, just to be fed to a place where I could be balanced, because I was empty for so long. So it, like, this for infertility has strengthened my relationship, which I don't think would have happened without it. I don't think I would be where I am in faith without this. Like, sometimes you got to, you have to experience, as they say, like, the miracles for yourself and experience them for yourself. And I did. This was how I did that. This is how he chose to use that. And I don't think I would ever have this kind of relationship without. I don't know, if he wanted it, he would have something else happen. I'm sure, to get me to this place. But infertility is the reason why I have the kind of relationship I have with him, because I know that he can truly do anything. So that kind of just made him more of not just the God that's in scripture. Like, I've seen that, I read that, we know the scriptures, we know the miracles, we know, raising dead, we know the stopping of the issue of blood, we know all of those things. But when you experience it for yourself, it's like, he's not just a God in the Bible. He is still that God today. So that kind of just made me have my own experience with him. And then the relationship with my husband, like, that has, once we got out of that place where I actually pushed him away, we went just the same way I did with even my relationship with God, pushing them away to kind of seclude myself and isolate myself, and allowing the enemy just to have me in that isolation place and whisper a bunch of lies to me. He would tell me, like, I need to let my husband go. Like, I'm holding him back. He needs to be with someone that can truly get him to a place where he has kids. I'm not going to keep him from having kids. He could be happier with someone else. He'll resent me later. Like, he says it's all good. He says he doesn't need kids now, but 10 years down the line, he's going to be angry with you. He's going to resent you. So I started to actually draw away and push away in the same aspect, and just telling him, like, listen, you need to go. Just go do you, because I'm going to do me. and pushing him away, and grateful, like he just dismissed the nonsense, as he says. And he still, he still checked up on me. He still sat with me, even when we just sat and said nothing. Because at times I would tell him, like, just stop, talking, because you don't know. Like you say, you understand. You don't understand. Like, you don't get it. But that made me realize later on, after we got out of that he has his own experience as well. Like, it's hard for them to see you go through something and really can't do anything. So whereas I thought this was just really me and my walk, it had a completely different weight just for him, as equal but different. So it brought us closer afterwards. We didn't get closer until after Shanice was born. And I mean, when I say closer, I mean like being more vulnerable and actually sharing what our feelings were like during this, like our sad moments, the times when we weren't around the other person and we were pretending to be okay. Like those moments when we were alone or we were in the bathroom by ourselves, we knew what the other was going through. We actually shared those things. And it took us to another level of intimacy because we had this. So he was able to tell me, like, I didn't really know what to do. I was just saying what I thought I should be saying. And I told him, like, the reason why I was acting this way was because I just didn't want to. Not that I didn't want to be married to you, but I really I felt like I was damaged goods. And a lot of those times, those are things that we create in our head. He didn't feel any of those things. All of the things that I was projecting on him, he felt none of those. He didn't see me as damaged. He really, truly meant like if he didn't have kids, he was really okay with that. He says, you made up this whole scenario and I never told you any of this. So it got us to a place where we really stopped doing things separately. And if we had a worry separately, we would come together and actually say, like, okay, come to the table moment. What is it really? Like you say, this is okay. And we've gotten to a point where we now know when you say that you're okay, he can kind of tell that I'm not. I can kind of tell he's not. So it got us to points where we can actually see, because we've seen each other at our lowest and most damaged. We know what that looks like on the other person, what that looks like on their face, what it looks like on their sleep pattern, what it looks like on their eating habits. Like I can tell just by his eating habits, his sleeping patterns, if he tosses and turns too much. Like that has gotten me to a place where even if we don't verbally talk at that time, we're in tune to say, this looks familiar. I know that he's struggling with X, Y, and Z. Or if he sees me quiet or drift off, he knows that I'm worried about X, Y, and Z. So it's brought us closer because of it, but it almost tore us apart. So, and that's,
Yes. So let's talk about therapy and some of the clients you have. What is like the number one struggle that you see couples with fertility challenges coming to you for? And then how do you work with them to, overcome that struggle?
Communication. A lot of times we have a lot in our head that we don't say. And one of the things I have to tell my couples, even if you don't say it, you're saying it. So you think because you're thinking it because you don't verbally communicate it, your body is still going to communicate it some way, shape, or form. Your tone is going to communicate it. Your body language, your intimacy is going to decrease. Like our body, we have a natural desire to say what we are feeling. It's going to come out, even if we don't say it. So I always find that communication is usually the biggest thing because we don't know, we're scared to say it, what the other person might think. They're going through something they feel like the other person isn't going to understand. So because I've been there, so I say you got to give them, you can't blame them for something that you haven't given them an opportunity to do. You're blaming them for not understanding when you haven't even given them an opportunity to try and understand. Now, if you give them the opportunity and you feel that they don't understand, then that's one thing. But if you haven't even given them the opportunity to, you have to give them that space. You're prejudging something that has not happened, and that's not fair to them. They might rise to the occasion, but you have not given them the opportunity. And that's a lot of times, that's all things that we've done in our own head. We have not communicated that before it manifests into feelings, lack of eye contact, body language, all of that still comes out, even if we don't say it. So I always say, try it. try to communicate with them verbally, telling them what's on your mind and allowing them the opportunity to do it. Then if it doesn't work, you guys can come back to me in the next session and then we can walk through how that went. But most of the times it was never even done in the first place. It wasn't communicated verbally. And we've had this discussion to ourselves, with ourselves, but not with the other person. So that's usually the main thing of them just not being able to communicate because of fear that they don't understand. The husband doesn't want to say anything because, you know, he doesn't know how to say it. Should I say this? How do I say that? Everything I say might be wrong. So he's now scared to communicate because he doesn't know how. It's a very delicate situation. I get it. She doesn't communicate because he doesn't understand. And in the midst of it, even though they're not communicating for, you know, two different reasons, the main issue is that you're not communicating. So let's try it. So what I do is I actually have them have that conversation with me. Okay, so all this week you didn't have that conversation. Let's have it right now. So then I kind of guide them in having that conversation, having the dialogue. This is how you can kind of probe her and ask her and see where she is. This is how you can kind of tell him where you are mentally without it being demanding, without it being commanding. And I just give them the verbiage of how to say it, but they're still saying it. And they kind of can use those methods and techniques in any conversation, regardless of the topic. So we just actually do it right then and there. And I just kind of sit back and watch them play it out. And then I can see, okay, this is where the issue lies. If there is any, sometimes there isn't one, but they were just scared to say what they really felt. So I'm just there as a mediator to say, okay, did you hear what she was saying? What did you hear? Did you hear what he is saying? What did you hear? And then we kind of just role play it out that way.
So good. So good. And I think that just can apply to anybody. Take any scenario in marriage.
Exactly. It
right.
does. It does. I said take that and then have another conversation.
Right. Oh, so good. So what are some books or devotionals you mentioned earlier or any other resources that you would recommend to the ladies who are listening who may be going through some fertility challenges and just need some encouragement?
So now there's the Bible app. So if they have the Bible app, I tell my couples too, you can search any topic in the Bible app and it can bring up a million devotionals for it. Like you can put in green apples and it's going to bring in a devotion about green apples. So you can actually plug in fertility and you can actually go through if it's male factor, they have one for that. Female factor, they have secondary infertility. So you've had a kid, but now your second one. Like there is, and they get to choose and you can actually sample. So I always tell the ladies, go through and sample the devotional. You can, once you press sample, you can see what the dialogue is about. Did it resonate with you? If it resonated with you, cool, start the plan, read it day to day. If it didn't, go on to the next one. See what that one's like. So there are a million ones because now, you know, there isn't any, you know, honestly, there is limited like hardcover devotionals, but the Bible app gives it in small doses. So you can actually do 3 days. You can do 5 days. You can do 30 days. I always pick 5 days to start with the ladies on because it gives you just enough, but not too much because I never start a first time on 30 days, like baby steps. So let's do 5 days. And it just gives them just enough to get to, okay, the next month. Because right now I don't want to overwhelm them and give them something else that they have to track for 30 days now, along with everything else that they're tracking along. So we just start off with 5 days. And then I actually go through it with them. So you can actually do it with me. And I can do it with them. We do the devotional together. We can actually comment together. And I'll say, you know, today, what did this devotional say to you? Like, what did you get from today? And they can actually notate it and text it in. And then I can share, okay, oh, that was good. You know, even if that wasn't, you know, even if you didn't feel like you got the greatest revelation, that's okay too. You planted the seed and you never know when this might spark something else. Or, you know, they might say, this took me back to a really, you know, a scary place. I'm like, well, that's okay too. Like everything, there is no wrong answer. There's no wrong response. I just want them to respond at all and get it out. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be something nice or, you know, today was a great day. Hallelujah. Some days it's not, but that's good. I'd rather you put it here than you take it out somewhere else. So we can kind of actually communicate together through devotional. Another way is I actually wrote a devotional based on that, but it's fertility. It's a fertility workbook based off of what I was going through. And it starts off from their diagnosis, what it was like. It walks them. It's not just a devotional, but it's actually a journal, because journaling is just my usual go-to. So you can actually journal what you're going through, okay, during the diagnosis phase. Then it takes them through the next phase. Okay, I go through all the stages of grief as they're going to go through it. And then once they get acceptance, we go through their plan phase. What's your plan? Are you going to go through the medicinal route? Some people aren't. Some people want to do a holistic approach. Cool. What holistic approach? We walk through that. We journal, have them write it out. What's their holistic plan? Some people don't want to do any plan right now, and they're just going to wait and pray. Okay, well, let's write down what that prayer is going to be. Part of that is because whatever their breakthrough is going to be, some people breakthrough might not be with a child. Somebody breakthrough might just be a breakthrough, okay, of acceptance. And that's good too. But I want that journal to be their testimony. Like, I want this to be an all-encompassing, so you can go ahead and minister to another sister that's going through the same thing and it might have the same outcome. How did you do it? You can show, listen, this is where I started from. And it journeys how God is going to bring them out of it. Because he is. There is no option. The option is going to look different. Some might end up with a child, some might not. But the outcome is still always going to be victory, period. We don't have another ending. And it tells them that too. Like, I don't know what the end of this journal is going to look like for you, but I can promise you it'll be victorious. He might just have you be in accepting of, you just might not have a natural birth. You might adopt, or you might have someone donate a donor egg or a surrogate, or you just might be content as being just auntie, and that's okay too. But it's going to be victory. I promise you. And then it just walks them through, doctor's appointments, diet plans, medication, if they provide that, acupuncture. What's your holistic idea? What is that? How are you shifting your diet plan? So that's something that they can also do as well. So the main thing I recommend them is the Bible app. Download the Bible app. Find a devotional that speaks to them. Sign up for it. If they want, I can actually go through it with them and just be that, that cheerleader, that person that holds their hand, the intercessor, whatever they need to get them through those devotionals. And when they're done, there's a million more that they can do to kind of go through every phase. So that would be the first step, small bites of just walking through it and kind of filling their tank up, because they're going to need a full tank for whatever path they're going to go through in this journey.
Yes. So where can we connect with you after this episode goes live? Like, where you are on your website, your social media, all of that.
So the website is the number 3 cord, CORD, counseling.com. They can email me as well. And that is the number 3 cord info@gmail.com. My Facebook and Instagram is the number 3 cord counseling.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shakeena, for sharing your story on the podcast. And I'm so happy that I can now point people to you as a resource in my therapy. Yeah, because it's so different to have a therapist that that has gone through it and they understand versus just general grief therapists. Yeah. So I'm so happy to have you as a resource that I can point to some of the ladies in the Sisters-in-Laws community as just another person that they can go to, because it's always good to have another sister that knows.
Yep, I am here. Here. And I just wanted to say thank you for being another advocate in this mission that we have to kind of normalize the things that we go through, whether they're experienced loss or they miscarried or they never conceived at all. And it's just lessening that weight and that ugliness of loss, whatever it looks like, loss of never having it, loss of having it and then it's not here, like loss of what the expectations might be looking like of what you thought it would look like. So thank you for just being open, being transparent, because we need it.
Yes, we do. Thank you so much again. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. For show notes and more information on today's guest, go to sistersinloss.com. If you have not joined our online community, go to sistersinloss.com as well as sign up for our newsletter. We want you to be a part of the community so you can know all of the events that we have planned on as Sisters in Loss. Go to sistersinloss.com, sign up for our newsletter, join our online community, and stay connected with us. Talk to you soon.